Hi everyone, so in the last video we talked about the Kalam cosmological argument, some of the motivations. In this video we're going to take a look at some of the sort of worries. So in this video we're just going to start out by reviewing the Kalam cosmological argument. Then we're going to look at some criticisms of each premise. The beginnings premise, and we'll look at some worries for the philosophical support, and some worries for the scientific support. Then we'll turn to the principle of causation, and we'll look at some worries for the support via reason, and some worries for trying to support this sort of premise via experience. Then at the end of the video, we're going to notice that the argument, even if it does work, it seems as if there's certain gaps. And then the question comes, like, are we actually able to fill those gaps or not? So putting all these pieces together, we get Craig's full Kalam cosmological argument. Premise 1 says whatever begins to exist has a cause to its existence. Premise 2 says, well, the universe is one of the things that begins to exist. Therefore, the universe must have a cause to its existence. So remember, Craig gives two kinds of defense of this idea that the universe has a beginning. The first is a philosophical support that says if there was no beginning to the universe, then there'd be an infinite series of past events leading up to the present time. But he claims that actual infinities lead to absurdities like Hilbert's Hotel, and so can't exist in reality. Now, the worry with this is someone might just reply, look, maybe Hilbert's Hotel just shows that infinity is weird and hard for us to understand. Maybe it's possible for there to be an infinite series of past events, even though it's strange and difficult to understand. People are notoriously bad at understanding infinity. We tend to think of infinity as just another really big number. But infinity is not a number at all. Also, this seems really strange to most people, but you can actually give a proof that within mathematics, there's different sizes of infinity. Some infinities are bigger than others. Online, the Wi-Fi video actually gives an example of supercounters as well, so this was optional. You can take a look at that as try to sort of make the case that maybe it is possible for an infinite series to pass. Now, as I said, humans have finite minds here, and we're just not particularly good at thinking about infinity. So maybe Hilbert's Hotel, it seems strange, but that's not a reason necessarily to think that it's impossible. Maybe the strangeness is just due to the fact that we don't have particularly good thoughts about infinity. Now, the second worry is that he attempts to appeal to the Big Bang Theory as scientific confirmation of the beginning of the universe. But there are alternative theories or models of the universe, such as oscillating models. On these models, they say, no, there wasn't just a single sort of Big Bang. Rather, our sort of universe, there was a Big Bang, and it expanded, and then it contracts, and then it gets so small that it eventually has another Big Bang and starts expanding again. And so it goes through sort of getting bigger and bigger, getting smaller and smaller, getting bigger and bigger, getting smaller and smaller, just over and over and over for always. Now, Craig suggests that the Big Bang Theory, however, is the theory that's most strongly supported by the scientific evidence. Assessing that requires looking very carefully at the scientific evidence itself. And I'll just note here that most scientists agree with Craig that the Big Bang Theory does the best job of explaining the evidence. And there are a few dissenting voices defending alternative models like the oscillating model. But so this is an open question to consider. What about the principle of causation? Why should we believe this? Well, remember, Craig tried to defend this by saying, look, our reason, if you just think about this idea by itself, you'll realize that it has to be true. Similar to the same way I can just sit in my chair and think really hard to realize that there are no married bachelors. I can realize that there's nothing that comes into existence without a cause. The worry for this, though, is, look, a bachelor, when I think about that idea, I think it's an unmarried adult male. That's just what it means. And so when I add in the idea of a married bachelor, I realize that that just means a married, unmarried adult male. And so I can see the contradiction explicitly when I use my reason to analyze the relevant ideas into these sort of smaller parts. But now consider the claim, something begins to exist without a cause. At least in that sentence, it doesn't look like there's any obvious contradiction. So the question becomes, can you analyze these ideas into smaller parts to bring out an explicit contradiction like we did with the case of a married bachelor? And so it seems like the burden is on the defender of this premise to show that there's a contradiction if they believe that there is one. All right, now, some people, though, try to defend this premise by an appeal to our experience rather than an appeal to just using reason by itself. The idea is, in our experience, we never see anything begin to exist without a cause. So, that might give us some reason to believe it's unlikely, even if not contradictory. So, it'd be unlikely that anything begins to exist without a cause. Right, so, what's the problem with that kind of reasoning? Well, maybe this principle is true within our universe, so within our experience, but that's not necessarily a reason to think it's true of the universe itself, of things outside our experience. So why should we think that the way things work in the universe is how they work outside the universe? Here's a couple ways to sort of develop that reasoning further. One idea is you might say, look, we're equivocating on the word beginning when we say that things in the universe have a beginning, and when we say the universe has a beginning. The word beginning might be used in two different senses. When I say Sam has a beginning, that seems to mean something different than the universe has a beginning. The idea here is, look, when I say Sam has a beginning, I mean there's a point in time that Sam exists, and there's an earlier point in time where Sam did not exist. So I went from non-existence to existence. But when we say the universe has a beginning, that means something very different. Because according to the Big Bang Theory, the sort of starting point of the universe is literally the beginning of time. There is no time before the universe. And so there is no earlier time. There's no time at which the universe didn't exist, because time doesn't exist until the universe exists. And so the universe doesn't begin to exist in the sense of it went from non-existence to existence at a later time, because for any time that actually existed, the universe existed. So Sam has a beginning means something very different than the universe has a beginning. And thus you might sort of think, so the rules about the behavior of things in the universe, of the things that begin to exist in the one sense, doesn't necessarily apply to the universe itself that begins to exist in a very different sense. Another way of making this point is by saying that it commits a fallacy of composition. And this occurs when you mistakenly reason that an object has certain features because all the parts of that object have that feature. So you reason from the parts are this way, so the whole thing is this way. Here's an example. Sam's body is made entirely out of atoms. All atoms are invisible to the human eye, therefore Sam's body is invisible to the human eye. You can see the mistake. So yes, the parts here are the atoms, and they have the feature of being invisible to the human eye. The whole is my whole body, and my whole body is made out of those parts, but just because the parts have that feature isn't a good reason to think that the whole has that feature. Similarly, it seems as if the same mistake is being made when you say, well, because everything in the universe, the parts of the universe, must have a cause to their beginning, therefore the universe as a whole must have a cause. Now, to understand a final worry for the argument, let's take another look at it. The universe has a beginning. Whatever begins to exist has a cause to its existence. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Now, notice here, the conclusion here falls short of saying that God exists. It just says there's a cause of the universe. So even if we get this far, we would need another premise that connects the cause of the universe to God. So adding this extra premise, we'd get something akin to the following. The universe has a beginning. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. So the universe has a cause. Well, if the universe has a cause, then that cause is God. Therefore, God exists. All right, so now we've made the connection between a cause of the universe and God. But that premise 4, if the universe has a cause, then that cause is God, why should we believe that? Even if we believe that the initial argument works and we get to a cause, why should we think that the cause has to be God? So maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a purely natural or physical cause. Maybe there's something that exists outside this universe that is still physical in nature, still material in nature. Maybe some kind of forces or fields. Maybe it's an impersonal force. Why should we think that the cause has to be a person? Or even if it was a personal cause, maybe it was multiple gods. Maybe we shouldn't be monotheists, but polytheists. And even if you make an argument that it was a single person, why should we believe that the person is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent? Maybe that person has a completely different character or nature. So how might someone try to reply to this argument? Well, I think the essential reply is going to be, look, the argument's not intended to fully prove God's existence. It's only attempted to get you on sort of one step on the path to that conclusion. It's only meant to get you to the claim that there has to be a cause of the universe. And then they're going to claim, so that goes some way to proving God, even if it doesn't go all the way. Other arguments would need to come in and sort of help support beliefs about the nature of that cause. However, there are some things we could say about the nature of that cause, even sort of just by looking at the nature of the argument for a cause. First, whatever the cause is, it has to exist outside the physical universe because, well, it has to be a cause of that physical universe. It must also exist outside of time because if it too was in time, we could say, well, what happened before that? And what happened before that? So there has to be a beginning of time, and that means whatever causes time to exist must itself be outside of time. According to Craig, he also thinks that the cause of the universe would have to be a person with a mind and free will. His reasoning, sort of yet again, comes from Al-Ghazali, and the idea is if the cause of the universe was just some eternally existing force, some impersonal force, well then, if the cause was around eternally, the effect would be around eternally, and then the universe would just always exist. But then the universe wouldn't have a beginning. So he says, in order to make sense of this, whatever causes it to exist must be a decision that a person makes to freely bring the universe into existence. Now, I'm not as sure that this third one really makes as much sense as the other two. Because when I think of someone making a choice or deciding to to do something at a certain time, it looks as if a decision is something that itself happens in time. But if this decision had been around eternally, if that desire of God to create a universe had been around eternally, then it seems as if it too would likely bring about the effect, the universe, for all eternity, sort of infinitely. So I'm not sure that his reasoning there really supports the idea that it's a person rather than a non-person. But that's something for you to think about. So a common objection that I also hear from students is the idea that the argument must fail since it would apply just as much to God as it would to the universe. The idea is, just as the universe can't just sort of pop into existence, if God exists, then something must cause God. This objection, though, misunderstands the argument. Craig doesn't claim that everything has a cause. The claim is that whatever has a beginning has a cause. That is, if it has a beginning, then it didn't exist, and then it started to exist. It changed from non-existing to existing, and so we need something to explain or cause that change to happen. But if God is thought to be an eternal being with no beginning, then God doesn't go from non-existing to existing. God just always existed, and so we don't need a cause to explain any change there, since there was none. However, it is interesting to note that God is traditionally described as having infinite reality. But is God's reality then an actual infinity? If so, would that cause any worries for Craig's Kalam cosmological argument? Anyways, that's it for today. Our next video is going to start talking about Paley's design argument that will avoid a lot of these worries we saw with the cosmological argument, but it will have its worries of its own. See you then. Bye-bye.